Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. Don't you all love Mick? You love Mick Borsman. I love Mick Borsman. Just adorable. He's adorable. We love him. Hey, I'm glad to be with you. If you're studying at this school, I just want to let you know that you picked a top-notch school. This is a great school for you to be a part of. It's a great school that really not only teaches you about God, but also teaches you how to be a real person when you go out into the world. So wherever you are, whether you're undergraduate, whether you're in Talbot, wherever you are in the school, we're glad that you're here. I want to tell you a little bit about my life, and particularly one night in my life, because my life some of the times is much like yours. It can be pretty busy, right? So I have a 7-year-old, I have a 9-year-old, and then I have just a muy caliente Latina wife named Amy, who is very gorgeous and tanned and toned, and then she has this. And so she often says that she has 3 kids, a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old, and then this right here. And so I didn't know this, but part of my responsibility as a father is doing the children's homework. I didn't know this. I thought that we shared it. But I found this out one night in particular when, like, the next day, Amy said, well, my 9-year-old Joel has not done his project yet. And if you don't have elementary school kids yet, let me just warn you, when they have homework, that's not their homework, that's your homework. And when they have projects, that's not their project, that is your project, especially when they're in the 2nd and 3rd grade. And you will end up doing that, and you will end up being so frustrated, and you will think, I'm an educated adult, and yet I can't figure this out. And so Joel's project, which was due in 2 days, was to create a mobile. And they were studying insects. So it was supposed to be a mobile with hanging insects that he created. It was really a disgusting project, but that was what he had to create. And so the night before, we had gotten everything done, everything was set, and I showed Amy, and she said, where's the string? And I said, well, I don't know. I don't know. I went around looking. I said, honey, I can't find the string. She said, well, we don't have any. I said, well, why did you make me look? She said, because it's fun. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to go to Target. She's like, why are you going to Target to get string? I said, because Target has everything. She said, well, you should go to Walmart. I said, no. There are 2 people in the world, Target people, Walmart people. I'm Target people, okay? I go to Target. So I went to Target, and I walked in, and I've never had trouble finding anything at Target, and I promise you I'm not making this up, okay? I walk into Target and find the first person that I can find is a young man working, and you can tell he's pretty tired, and I said, excuse me, sir, can you tell me where the string is? And he looks at me, and he says, string? And I said, yeah, string. I'm helping my son with a mobile project. We need to hang things. Can you tell me where the string is? And he said, I don't understand. And I said, I'm looking for the string. Do you know what that is? And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, string. You fly a kite with it. It connects things. It's thin. I'm looking for string. And he said, sir, I just don't understand. And it's at this point, I just kind of took a step back, a couple of steps, because I wasn't willing to lose my witness over string. And I looked at him and I said, I have no idea how to describe to you what it is I'm looking for. And he said, do you mean thin rope? And I said, sure, give me some of that. I'll take it. Give me the thin rope. I want the thin rope. And he said, well, I need to get on my walkie-talkie to find out where that is. I'm like, good night. So I go over here and I'm just waiting, and he's talking, and he says, oh, sir, the thin rope is going to be over in the automotive section. I said, not the arts and crafts? He said, well, no, why would it be there? And I said, I don't know, it makes sense. That's why it wouldn't be there. So I go over to the automotive section. There's no string. There's no thin rope. There's not even a chain. There's nothing. And so I find a worker there, and I said, excuse me, could you help me find some string? I was told I was here. And she said, string? And I said, I'm done. I left. And I went home, and I took a bunch of my shoelaces and cut them off. And I created that, and we had rope right there. And then I came down, and I showed Amy, and she's like, whoa, that's weird. And I said, you have no idea what I've been through tonight. And she said, can I talk to you real quick? And I said, sure, and sat down. And she said, Caleb, can I be honest with you? And this is a warning sign, okay? Whenever your spouse asks that, you got to know that even if you say no, they're still going to be honest with you at that point. This is just bracing me. And I said, sure. And my wife Sweetest, most beautiful woman, just really nice, graduating with her MFT this December, looks at me and says, "You're not fun anymore." And I just looked at her, I said, "Well, you're going to make a great counselor." She said, no, I'm serious. "You're not fun anymore." She said, "I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, but you are not who you have been." And this was probably about a year and a half ago, maybe almost 2 years ago. And I just kind of took a pause, and I thought about it. And it's like when somebody says something to you, and it wells up inside of you, and like you've always suspected it, you've known it, you haven't wanted to own it in any way, shape, or form, but she told me that. And I thought to myself, she's absolutely right. Because, my past few years, had been a roller coaster. Being here from 1999 till 2010 was phenomenal. Being on staff at a church, coming to Talbot School of Theology, graduating from here, then going to Texas, was there for 3.5 years because all of us have to go through purgatory at some point. And so when I was there in Texas, I went to a turnaround church. And it was a great experience. And we had great success. There were people who were spiritually growing. We had people fully engaged in the church. The church grew from 300 to 150. And then the church grew from 150 to over 1,000. All that within about 3.5 years. But it felt like a ministry Vietnam at the same time because I had to fire about 17 staff members during that 3.5 years for just random things, not me being a jerk things, but for random things. And then how I left that church, I had a disagreement with somebody who I had a 19-year friendship with. It was somebody that was there for me in the formative years of my faith. And when he and I just really parted ways, and he felt that I had hurt him, and I felt like he had really wounded me and my family, it devastated me. And it devastated me probably more than what I realized. And when I left Texas, I ended up coming back to Simi Valley, to Southern California where God lives, especially when it's 70 degrees. And I ended up going to Discovery, and Discovery was going great. It still is. We have a great staff. We're a large, growing church. People are fully engaged. They're owning their mission. People are going into ministry. We have members of our church who are studying here. It's just a great experience being there. But despite all of that, I didn't realize how much my experience in the past impacted who I was today. And even more than that, I had no idea how much it impacted how God could use me tomorrow. As a matter of fact, I would put it this way, it was compromising how God could use me tomorrow. And I had never really owned it in that way until I processed it with my wife that night. And she said, "I think you need to talk to somebody." And I said, "Absolutely, but you got to understand." I said, "Honey, I go see a counselor every month, at least once a month, because I do. If you're going to be a pastor in any position, let me just encourage you real quick, you need to go see a counselor on a regular basis because you have so much you're taking in." And I said, "I'm going to see a counselor. I don't know what else you would really want me to do." And she said, "No, I understand that, but I think you need to talk to somebody who really knows you and really tell them what's going on and really, maybe they can help you." And so I took my advice because she's much smarter than I am and God loves her more. And so I decided to do what she said. And I called my friend Mike. And I told him the situation, told him what happened. Mike is a good friend of mine, known him for years. He's a pastor. Now he's leading a great ministry based out of Carlsbad area. And so he said, "Here's what I want you to do first. I want you, before we meet next week, I want you to read 2 Peter, and then, we meet and we're going to talk about what 2 Peter has to say." Now, I don't know if you've ever read 2 Peter. I've read 2 Peter. Okay, I believe Peter wrote 2 Peter. Some people may not. I personally do. 2 Peter is a book that he wrote back in the late 60s. The first persecution against the Christians by the Roman Empire under the Roman Emperor Nero had just broken out. And Christianity, even underneath that first persecution, under the reign of Nero, was actually skyrocketing, and it was growing in the midst of persecution in the late 60s. Now, you got to understand something, especially after watching the debates last night, some of you who may have done that, okay? If Christianity survived Nero, it's going to do fine under Hillary or Trump. So I just think some of us need to calm down a little bit. I'm not saying that we don't need to stand up, but I think we need to remember who's on the throne. And if he sat on the throne during Nero's reign, he's sitting on the throne right now. And so Peter writes this very last letter under the reign of Nero, under the persecution. Peter writes this when false teachers who were so wicked had taken advantage of the persecution and were seeping into the church, and they were actually trying to get people away from Christianity and to more of a self-centered, false view of Christianity, and Peter was warning people against that. But more than that, if you read 2 Peter, you got to understand these are the last words that Peter will ever write. Because in just a year or two, he's probably going to go to the cross and be crucified upside down, and he's going to be executed because of his relationship with Jesus and his refusal to silence his mouth. He's going to stand up. He's going to fulfill what Jesus said about him in John 21. And so I'm reading this, and I drive to this appointment. I'm like, okay, you went to Bible college, you didn't go to seminary, you need to take hermeneutics class. Okay, because I could have helped me better than you're helping me. I'm thinking as I'm driving there, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, hello, Philippians 4, hello, right? These would be books that would be good to read in my situation. And so I went there eagerly expecting to see the hermeneutic loopholes of how he would jump through and get me to where I needed to be through false teaching. And he said, "Did you read 2 Peter?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I read 2 Peter." I said, "I'm excited to see what happens here." He said, "I want you to read 2 Peter chapter 1 to me." And he said, "I want you to read verses 3 through 4. 2 Peter 1, 3 through 4. And so I read it to him. I said, "As we know Jesus better, his divine power gives us everything we need for living a godly life. He has called us to receive his own glory and goodness, and by that same mighty power, he has given us all of his rich and wonderful promises, and he has promised that you will escape the decadence all around you caused by the evil desires, and that you will share in his divine nature." And so I read that. I said, what do you want me to get out of that? He said, "What do you see about God there?" And I said, "Okay, I'm looking at this right here. I see that, as we know Jesus better, his divine power gives us everything we need for a godly life, that we are able to live our life because of his power. Without his power, we're not able to live the life that we're, supposed to live." And then it says that he has called us to receive his own glory and goodness. In other words, that word "called" literally means knowledge. It is by his knowledge that he's given us that, okay? That he is completely sovereign, that he knew us, that he chose us, that he gave us this, and that he has put us by his own design where we are in our life and in our ministry situation. In verse 4, "And by that same mighty power, he has given us all of his rich and wonderful promises. He has promised that you will escape the decadence, the evil, the corruption all around you caused by evil desires, and that you will also share in his divine nature." And I'm reading this right here. I'm like, I get this. I understand that. God is God. And some of the times, let's just be honest. During difficult times, we kind of use that and it becomes cliche, and we kind of misuse the name of God, don't we? We say, well, God's got this. God is in control. I can't tell you how many times in the past, before this moment, I had talked to friends in ministry who were struggling with elder teams, who were struggling with members in the church who were power brokers that they never knew were power brokers, who were struggling trying to find a job, who were very wounded in ministry, and they were trying to get back in, and they couldn't, and they didn't understand why. And my answer, I look back at it now, it always seems so cliche saying, well, God's in control. God has this. If you've been through Talbot School of Theology, you know that God is in control. You know that. It's a different thing to feel it. It's a different thing to feel it when ministry punches you in the gut, when it slaps you around. And it's even different to feel it when ministry starts hitting your spouse and punches your kids. And you think to yourself, I love Jesus, but his bride, I'm not really a fan of right now. And he said, I want you to read verse 5. "So make every effort to apply the benefits of these promises to your life." And so in those first couple verses, we just got done talking about the sovereignty of God, how he's in control. And now we switch over to our responsibility, right? He says, so make every effort. In other words, you have a role to play in who you are. It is God putting you where you need to be. It is by his design. But within God's sovereignty, God is so sovereign and powerful that he still holds you responsible for who you are. And Peter says, so make every effort to apply the benefits of these promises to your life, and then your faith will produce a life of moral excellence. A life of moral excellence that leads to knowing God better. Knowing God leads to self-control. Self-control leads to patient endurance. And patient endurance leads to godliness. And godliness leads to loving other Christians. And finally, you will grow to have genuine love for everyone. The more you grow like this, the more you will become productive and useful in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. But those who fail to develop these virtues are blind, or at least very short-sighted. They have already forgotten that God has cleansed them from their old life of sin. And when I got done reading this within the context of what we were talking about, I knew exactly why he had me read 2 Peter. Because you look at this right here, and before Peter even gets in to warning Christians about the false teachers that are coming and that are already in the church and that are taking advantage of the persecution that Nero started, before that ever happened, here's what he says. He says, you need to work on you. Listen to me on this. This is huge. This is huge. Listen to me on this, okay? If you do not work on yourself today, you are compromising how God will use you tomorrow. If you don't work on you today, you are compromising how God will use you tomorrow. I am not saying that God can't, but I'm saying that God has put you here. He has put you there by his call, by his design, and at the same time, he still says it is part of your responsibility to build on what you have, to take care of yourself, to know who you are. And in the context of 2 Peter, I believe he starts off like this because when you are going through great persecution, when you are going through false teachers, when you know that hard times are coming, if you have not taken care of who you are today, you will not be able to stand for what tomorrow holds. And I read this and I was just like, man, that was me. That was me all these years. That was me all these years being in seminary, so academic, so focused on the grades, so focused on the translation, so focused on the theology. And hear me out on this. I am not insulting any of that. All of that we have to do, we need to fall in love with because it prepares us to do what we need to do. But I realized how much I neglected working on who I was and owning the emotions that were controlling me. And I forgot who I was, and I forgot that I had been saved from worry, anxiety, guilt, shame, corruption. And yet, even though those things were dead to me, I was still being controlled by them. And here's what I've learned. God never speaks to us through a lack of self-control, through anxiety and shame and guilt and corruption. Those are never the tools of God. Peter says right here, he says, make every effort. A life of moral excellence leads to knowing God better. Knowing God leads to self-control. Self-control leads to patient endurance. And that word right there for endurance has to do with facing difficult, upsetting circumstances that come at you again and again and again. And Peter says, you have to keep moving. You have to keep moving forward here. Godliness leads to love for other Christians. We can't love each other, and we can't love people who are far from God if we have not controlled our own emotions. And I love how he says this right here in verse 8. The more you grow like this, the more you will become productive and useful in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. In other words, another way of saying it is, the more that you do this, the less lazy you will be in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. You and I can come through this school and we can get A's on every single test, on every single theological paper. I've seen it before, But listen to me on this, okay? If we do not work on our character, if we do not work on being self-aware and understanding ourselves and understanding our insecurities and how our sinful nature plays out in ourselves, in that moment, we are compromising everything we're learning and making ourselves useless for the future. When we don't work on ourselves today, we actually make ourselves and compromise our usefulness for tomorrow and how God can use us. And too much is writing on it, right? Too much. I mean, I think about all the people that I probably could have had better conversations with. I think about all the individuals that I did not trust the way that I should have trusted. I think about situations. Did I have success? Yes. Did I have success in Jesus? Yes. Did I have success by how American Christianity defines success? Yes, I did. But at the same time, people, I think that it could have been even more than that if I had really worked on my emotions and who I was. And so today, I just want to very simply encourage you the way that Mike encouraged me on that day. When I read 2 Peter and I realized that Peter was preparing his readers for tomorrow and even more things that would happen to them. You don't know what will happen tomorrow. You don't know if one day you'll get married and you'll have a divorce. You don't know if one day you'll be at the church and you will be stabbed in the back by a friend. You don't know if you will be in a situation or a context and be completely misunderstood. You have no clue if you're going to lose a child. You have no clue if you're going to wind up having a child who seems to reject everything that you taught them. You have no clue what will happen to you in the future. But I can tell you this: if you and I work on ourselves today, we will not compromise what God can do in us tomorrow. And I hope that you do a couple things. Number one, I hope that whatever it takes for you to become aware of who you are and how your insecurities and sinful nature plays out in your personality, I hope that you will start taking advantage of that and owning it. Because the more that you do that, the stronger that you will be. I really, really hope that some of you will really consider going to see a counselor on a regular basis, especially if you're going into ministry, especially if you're already in ministry and you're working on a degree right now here. Biola has a counseling center. I'm sure you probably get a discount. I tell you what, that is way more worth it than a Disney annual pass. Not much, but kind of. Disneyland is therapy in and of itself, except when you have kids. But you need to make sure that you have these markers in your life. Too much rides on it. You need to read books about how to become emotionally intelligent and understand who you are, because so much rides on our emotions. I love how the Message translation translates Proverbs 4:23. It says, "Be careful what you think, for your thoughts run your life." I love how the Message translation translates Proverbs 14:30. It says, "A sound mind makes for a robust body, but runaway emotions corrode the bones." A sound mind takes you a long way, but runaway emotions will corrode your life, and it will spread like a cancer, and it will lead to all the things that God has saved you and me from: worry, anxiety, gossip, lust, anger, unforgiveness, bitterness, shame, guilt. Keep on going down the list. You have too much writing on it. And let me tell you the most important thing that's writing on it, okay? I think about that day in Target when I was looking for the string. And I went home, and I was thinking in my head before Amy and I had this long conversation, which really was one that changed my life in a way that it needed to. I thought to myself, I'm so frustrated with Target, I'm going to switch to Walmart. And then I apologized. I said, "No, Lord, I didn't mean that. I'm sorry. I'm not going to. I'm not going to switch to Walmart." But I said, man, it should be easy for me to walk into Target and find string. That should not be a difficult thing when you go to Target. And I felt like after reading this, I've never audibly heard the voice of God, but I could imagine God saying to me something like, it should be easy for people to look at your life and to see Jesus and to find Jesus. And because I had not owned who I was, it was not as easy to see Jesus in my life as it should have been. And that is what makes it all worth it. You know as well as I do, you can't take anything to heaven with you. You can take other people. And when you work on you, people will be able to see Jesus in you. And the thing about Jesus I love is that Jesus was attractive to people who were nothing like him because he treated them well. And what is Peter saying here? What does he say? He says, hey, self-control, godliness, all that leads to loving other Christians, to loving other people who are far from God. You have no idea what's riding on it. And when I own this and when I realize this, I can tell you something, my marriage improved tremendously. I didn't realize how much of it was impacting my kids. I didn't realize that my kids were looking to me on a consistent basis, especially when they're young, to see how I manage my emotions and how I achieve emotional stability. And I could see the way that I used to be playing out in them, but now I was able to talk to them about it. I could see my relationship with my executive pastor, my relationship with my staff improve. I could see that my preaching improved, but more than anything else, I could see in some way, shape, or form, and I'm not being arrogant when I say this, I could see that when I surrendered my emotions more and more to God, people could see Jesus clearly through me and what I had to say to them. You have no idea what hangs in the balance of working on yourself today. Refusing to work on yourself today compromises how God can use you tomorrow. But when you own and work on who you are today, you are setting God up to use you in a powerful way tomorrow, no matter what happens. And people will easily be able to find Jesus in your personality.
Biola University prepares Christians to think biblically about everything, from science to business to education and the arts. Learn more at biola.edu.